how is an inheritance treated in a divorce? So my spouse received $1,000,000 from a random uncle. And now what happens? Well, it's not your money. Doesn't just get split right away. Doesn't get split at all, actually. Except if you do a couple things. So let's start with the basic premise. Inheritance is not generally part of the marital pot, part of the marital distribution, okay? But any monies that that inheritance spits out will be. So let's use an example. Let's say, for example, you were given certain stocks as an inheritance, and the stocks paid $1 in dividends at the end of the year, and your salary was $10. Your salary now, for the purposes of support, is $11. You get it? So you basically add whatever monies that you have made from the inheritance onto your regular support. Use a bigger example. Let's say you were given a building. Let's say your family and you had a building of renters and you inherited that building. Well, now you have a profit of that building of $1 at the end of the year, and your salary was $10. For the calculation of support, your salary is $11. You get it? So the money that's spit off of the asset that you inherited is part of the marital pot and comes into the analysis of support for your support, whether you're paying child support or you're paying spousal support. Okay? Now, what I say to my clients is don't buy a cup of coffee for your spouse with that inherited property. Why? Because if you use the income and or asset that was inherited and you use it for marital purposes, you could wash and change the classification of that asset in from an inheritance, which is a non-exempt asset in the marriage, to being brought into the actual marriage and allowing that to be distributed. Here's a recent example I had of a case where an individual received an inheritance from the spouse's family. So then that spouse took that money and helped build a investment property with her current spouse. Then they got divorced, and the spouse said, well, wait a second, that was my mom's money that I got as an inheritance. I want that money back. And the other side says, well, no, you had that money and gave it to me, and we used it as if it was ours. So therefore, it's part of the marital distribution, and it doesn't get separated out from the marital pot, so to speak. It's a big deal. So when you get an inheritance, you really should look over and see what it is, where it came from, and how and what monies are going to be spit out from that. You have to get with an attorney who's experienced to understand some of the sensitivities of an inherited asset. Find out what it is, what's your best worst case scenario, whether you can use the asset in your marriage and have it exempt. Figure that out before you start spending money, because you have to be careful. Your inheritance may be part of the marital equitable distribution. So you got to be real careful with it.